Caledonian Elixir. From Glasgow, Scotland, welcome to the Caledonian Elixir. I'm your host Vincent, and we are on YouTube, Rumble, X, and also as a podcast on Spotify. So wherever you find us, don't forget to drop a like, subscribe, and follow. Please do, it helps the show. So I hope you're all well. I'm doing good. And it's hard to believe we're in December already. Is it, me, or does time fly in quicker nowadays? But anyway, for all you finding us for the first time, we're a show that covers everything from politics to the paranormal, told with wit and true grit, uncensored with guests and callers. And today we have a special guest joining us, John Hamer. He is the author of several books, including The Falsification of History, Our Distorted Reality, and Behind the Curtain, a chilling expose of the banking industry. And I think his research is more important than ever as it critiques the mainstream narrative that's been peddled to us on a daily basis by the mockingbird media, essentially. And I think it's very important to expose the hidden power structures. So, without further ado, John Hamer. Hello, John. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you, Vincent. Can you hear me?
Yes. Is it Hammer or Hamer?
Hamer.
Hamer. So, how are you today, this fresh winter's evening?
I'm a bit better now. I've just been caught in heavy traffic for about an hour, but apart from that, yeah, it's all good.
Mm-hmm. So I can hear you've got a English accent. So whereabouts are you? Without doxing yourself, whereabouts are you from?
I'm based in Scarborough, in the northeast of England, just down the coast from Middlesbrough, I guess, and up the coast from Hull.
Mm-hmm. So, in a general way, can you provide us with your background and how it led you into becoming a writer that exposes, among many things, the falsification of history?
Yeah. I mean, my my original background, I worked all my working life, I was in IT. I was latterly an IT consultant until the very late 1990s. But there was an incident in 1997 that basically changed my life, and that was the death of Princess Diana. Some friends who were in Paris at the time that it happened, they'd been out for a meal that evening. They'd gone back to the hotel room, and they switched on the TV, as you do, flopped on the bed to watch a French news broadcast. They couldn't understand a word of it, but they could see the images. And the images were of Princess Diana walking unaided into an ambulance.
Mm-hmm.
They came back and they mentioned this to me. And I said, no, that can't be right, because we know that she never regained consciousness. She died in the ambulance on the way to hospital. And they said, well, we can only tell you what we saw. That was definitely the case. And so it kind of piqued my interest, and I started looking into stuff. And to cut a very long story short, it sent me down lots of rabbit holes. And so for virtually the past 30 years, this is all I've done. I retired from IT very shortly afterwards and concentrated on writing. And I now have 9 books to my name, number 10 coming along nicely.
What was the first book that you wrote?
Falsification of History, the one that you mentioned. That was my first one. That was published. It was written between 2009 and 2011 and published very early 2012.
Right. Can you give me an example where history has been falsified? And
Sorry for laughing, but I mean, where do I start with
I
that
know,
one?
I know, I know. As what? Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, there's
Give
lots.
me
I mean, I
give
just
me a
mentioned one of
perfect
them.
example that really took you back, and it's an example where our mainstream media sources provide us with one perspective of it, one narrative. However, yourself has a completely different take on it.
Yeah,
For example, you could say
absolutely. Yeah, I mean,
9/11 or the death of Princess Diana.
yeah. Well, any of those that you pick. I mean, both of those and many, many more besides are all. I mean, these things obviously happen, but not in the way that they tell us, and usually not for the reasons that they tell us. You know,
Mhm,
the only way that a few thousand people, and that's all there are of these people, can control billions of us is by creating a fake reality, which propounds their own agenda. So, yeah, the death of Diana is one example. 9/11 is another example. These are very popular ones, by the way. There's lots of smaller ones, some bigger. The moon landings, JFK's assassination, you know, the world wars, everything. It's all, none of it is as we are told. It's all about propagating their agenda in order to keep us in fear, number one,
mhm.
and keep us under control, number two. So
And
yeah, that's the reason why I do it.
and how do they manufacture a consensus reality?
Because they control the mainstream media. It's as
Mhm,
simple as that. You know, the media has a very, very powerful and insidious influence on all of us. You know, and I'd include
mhm,
myself in that. You know, up until the time when I began to awaken to what is really going on in the world. The problem is that there is an alternative viewpoint, but it
mhm,
doesn't have much of a platform. In fact,
mhm,
you know, the platform that the people uh, who seek the truth seekers, the platform that they have, you know, such as your own podcast, for example, no disrespect, but it's tiny, tiny, tiny compared to
mhm.
the BBC, the ATV, Sky News, all the rest of it.
Yeah. Mhm.
You know, that it's a massive, overwhelming influence on us and our opinions.
You know, I was thinking to myself, because I read an interesting quote by Carol Quigley, you know, and it goes something like,
Oh yeah,
the powers of financial capitalism had a far-reaching aim, and that was nothing less than to create a world system of financial control in private hands, able to dominate the political system of each country as a whole. Now, can you explain how the City of
yeah.
London is one of those shadow power centres where you have private hands dominating the political system of the United Kingdom?
Yeah, well, I mean, City of London, yeah, the City of London, as opposed to London itself, London, the city itself. The City of London is 1 square mile of the city, which is just to the east of the centre, and that is the world's financial district. Okay, all of world finance is run from there. You know, some of this stuff sounds crazy, but I always make this point when I'm doing a talk, when I'm doing, you know, because I do public speaking, when I'm doing public speaking, when I'm doing podcasts, anything, I always make the point that don't, please, you people out there, do not believe what I'm saying. I urge you to look it up for yourselves because this information is all freely available. You know,
Mhm.
if you're persistent enough and you're able to look for it. So yeah, the financial capital of the world is the City of London Corporation, and I had, when I was in computing, I had dealings with them. And just to give the listeners and viewers a perspective on the kind of sums that these people deal with, when I was a software consultant, I went to a meeting at the City of London Corporation, which is what we're talking about, the financial hub of the world, and they were very interested in buying the software from the company that employed me. So I was sent down there to chat to them about their requirements. And they said, yeah, we've seen your software, we love it, and we want to go ahead with the deal, but we need reassurances on one or two things. And I said, okay. Then I got my notepad out. Yeah, what's the problem? I said, well, first of all, the number of digits in the currency field said it's only 9, isn't it? I said, yeah, 9, which is like a billion. Okay, so you could have a single transaction of up to 1 billion of whatever currency you wanted. And they said, no, that's not enough. I said, well, what do you want, 10 or even 11? They said, no, 14. And I said, 14? Are you joking? And they said, no. And just to put that in perspective, a 14-digit number is 100 trillion. And these are individual transactions. So that's just to give a little bit of perspective about the extent and the capability of this private run corporation that controls the world's finances, including the Bank of England, which is the British central bank, the Federal Reserve, which is the American central bank, and just about every other central bank in the world through proxies. So
Yeah, and
yeah,
these
it's a
central
vast,
banks,
vast empire.
and these central banks, we've
Sorry.
seen how they act in concert to manipulate, influence governments. You know, by controlling treasury loans or foreign exchanges, they usually act in concert, don't
Yeah.
they? Maybe for
Absolutely,
the
yeah. I mean,
audience, it might be a good idea to explain what a central bank is.
right, a central bank is a bank that is tasked with. Every country has one central bank. As I said, Bank of England is the UK bank. The Federal Reserve is the American bank. They tell us that they're owned by and controlled by the government. Absolutely not true. These are privately owned organizations, and they are tasked with controlling the issuance of currency of that particular country. Okay, now the significant thing about that is that when the government wants to inject more money into the economy, it has to go cap in hand to the Bank of England and say, could I have 100 billion or whatever amount of money they want to put in it? And the Bank of England says, yeah, no problem at all. Here you go. Here's your 100 billion. But by the way, we want interest on that. This is our money that you're taking, which by the way is created from nothing, but that's another story altogether. So yeah, the Bank of England charges the government, in that case the British government, interest on all the money it creates. And this is why, this is the reason for the national debt, the ever increasing national debt, because it's a vicious circle. The only way that they can pay the money back to the Bank of England is by creating more money. And so you get into this spiral of debt. And that is an ongoing thing. And this is true of every single country in the world. This is how money mechanics works through that particular process.
And debt control is what it's germane to what I was wanting to ask you next, because history is replete with examples of how central banks, financiers are involved in everything from nation building to nation destroying using debt control. I mean, look at a good historical example is the
Absolutely.
Bank of International Settlements and its connection historically with the Third Reich. As you know, like you're aware about how the Bank of International Settlements was involved with Nazi Germany, aren't you? Are you aware of the connections between
not specifically, but it may ring a bell when you say it. But go on. Yeah.
So, because of the Treaty of Versailles, there were war reparations on post-World War One Germany. So Germany effectively was mortgaged to the bankers who had loaned money to the Allies during World War One, especially the American banks. Then there was a plan called the Dawes Plan, backed by J.P. Morgan, which was essentially a plan to rebuild Germany, to build back better. This is the early 20th century version of Build Back Better. Now, at the end of the plan, it saw essentially the establishment of this Bank of International settlements, which served as a centre for a cartel of international bankers to work together. So essentially, and this included German financiers at the time, which may be peculiar to those listening. I know a lot of people would imagine that it would be French, British, and Americans, but a lot of German financiers were heavily involved in this Bank of International Settlements, like President President Schmatt. He was a Reichstag president. The Remember IG Farben, the company that operated and used the concentration camps in Dachau and Auschwitz. IG Farben had a presence in these concentration camps. Well, Hermann Schmitz, the president of IG Farben, also had a role in the Bank of International Settlements. So when the Nazis essentially took over and formed the Third Reich, and then they invaded other nations such as Austria and Czechoslovakia, the plundered gold and the plundered money went into the vaults of the Bank of International Settlements to basically pay down the reparations debt that they owed to the American bankers. So this campaign of war and destruction and pillaging smaller European nations, it was done in tandem and in cooperation with American banks in order to actually pay down the reparations. So essentially, the Third Reich was acting in concert with these big, central banks, and these central banks had the Third Reich essentially by the balls, because they had to pay down the war reparations. So it goes to show how debt control can break or make nations, and it's germane to what you were saying there about how central banks use the tools and levers that they have to manipulate governments.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's an interesting point that again, many people are not aware of this, but Germany did not finish paying its World War I reparations until 2009. So, it was 90 years after the war ended that it actually finished paying. And it's a truism to say that banks always finance both sides during any war. And quite often it is the bankers that generate that war. Again, that might seem unbelievable to a lot of people, but war brings massive profits for banks. There's no question about that. Through armaments loans and all the rest of it. A country's economy goes up through the roof during war because there's so much money generated from bank loans, etc. But it all has to be paid back at massive amounts of interest. They're masters of the world in that sense.
What was it that opened your eyes to the sheer influence or power that these banks have over society?
Well, once I kind of realized that the world was a totally different place to what we believe it to be, I started looking down all kinds of different rabbit holes, and that was one of them. It was, I read a book. I can't even remember the title of it now, but it was basically an exposure of the world banking system. It wasn't by anybody really famous. It was just kind of a tiny little book, a little more of a large pamphlet really than a book, and it just summarized the whole thing. Absolutely spot on. I can't even remember what it was called now, but and that is, I mean, to be honest, the banking situation is just part of this huge jigsaw puzzle of the how can I put it, the falsification of history, the title of the book, and how they've distorted our reality. It's just one. It's a big part, but it's just one part of how that is actually done. So there wasn't anything. Sorry,
for me, it was when I learned about how British finance, protected by the British Army in the British Navy controlled essentially the world's opium trade. You know, and it's in the 19th century,
Oh,
that is.
yes, of course.
And
Yeah.
the opium Pax Britannica, forcing
Yeah.
it onto other nations like China is a perfect example. You had the opium
Opium
wars.
wars. Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah, and
absolutely.
the relationship between the British East India Company, essentially using opium to pay down, imperial debt, and it's a stain
Yes.
on British history. What our government in the past was involved in, and I remember a major house involved in this mess at the time. Jardine Matheson. And Jardine
Yep.
Matheson corresponded with Jardine back in the UK, saying at the time when the opium wars broke out in China that the Chinese have fallen into the snare of rendering themselves liable to the British Crown. I mean, that quote there just sets it up for how the British Crown was involved with these corporations, and they were
Yeah.
subjugating hundreds of millions of people on the other side of the world to make a profit, and it was cruel
Yeah.
and malicious.
Yeah. I think I should just clarify that there, Vincent. I mean, people may not understand what you mean by the British Crown. I'm not sure what your audience consists of, but I'll just clarify. The British Crown is not necessarily the royal family, although they're part of it, obviously. But the British Crown Empire is just a synonym for the world financial empire, and it goes a lot deeper than that too. But that's the basis of it. So when we say the British Crown, it doesn't mean the king, such as he is, and all his minions. It actually means the British Crown Empire, which is based in the city of London, which, by the way, is a separate state to the UK. Not a lot of people know that, but that is the case.
And then you've got the offshore territories like the Isle of Man, the Isle of Jersey, and the money that passes through these territories. That often is laundered money connected to, drugs, etc. And we see
Cayman Islands as well.
Yeah.
Cayman Islands is a British protectorate. It's a tax-free area. Money laundering is absolutely rife through all those places. But yeah, sorry to interrupt.
Do you know a perfect example of how I see the system, and I think that you see the system in a similar way, is exemplified by this video, this short clip I'm just going to play here, and I'm sure you'll be familiar with the actor, the character in the clip. Yeah, clip one, please.
There's a reason education sucks, and it's the same reason that it will never, ever, ever be fixed. Because the owners of this country don't want that. I'm talking about the real owners now. The big, wealthy business interests that control things and make all the important decisions. Forget the politicians. The politicians are put there to give you the idea that you have freedom of choice. You don't. You have no choice. You have owners. They own you. They own everything. They own and control the corporations. They've long since bought and paid for the Senate, the Congress, the state houses, the city halls. They got the judges in their back pockets. And they own all the big media companies, so they control just about all of the news and information you get to hear. They want people who are smart enough to sit around the kitchen table and figure out how badly they're getting fucked by a system that threw them overboard 30 fucking years ago. You know what they want? They want obedient workers. Obedient workers. People who are just smart enough to run the machines and do the paperwork, and just dumb enough to passively accept all these increasingly shittier jobs with the lower pay, the longer hours, the reduced benefits, the end of overtime, and the vanishing pension that disappears the minute you go to collect it. All day long, beating you over the head in their media, telling you what to believe, what to think, and what to buy. That's what the owners count on. The fact that Americans will probably remain willfully ignorant of the big red, white, and blue dick that's being jammed up their assholes every day. Because the owners of this country know the truth. It's called the American dream, because you have to be asleep to believe it.
Yeah, that's...
seen it many times. I can almost recite it verbatim. George Carlin, brilliant
It's
guy.
true, but it's true, but isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely, yeah. I mean, what it missed off at the end there, it actually goes on to say it's a big club and you ain't in it.
Oh,
And by the way, that's the club
early.
that they beat you over the head with every day.
Yeah. Right. Okay. You're right. Yeah, but he nailed it. You know, he hit the nail on the head there, because they do act in concert with each other, and they're not really serving our interests. And you know, people are aware of it now. You know, because the media and information isn't monopolized by just a handful of corporations anymore. You do have these alternative media sources that, with hosts and all bigger than myself, that can research and do this work, and provide the audience with what is really going on. And so yeah, and it goes into what you're saying about the falsification of history, how these institutions were used to perpetuate that false simulation almost. And have you ever heard of a writer? He was a neuroscientist too, called John C. Lilly.
Doesn't ring a bell.
John C. There was a film made on about his research and work called Altered States. John C. Lilly was famous for using deprivation tanks and psychedelic drugs to reach new states of awareness and consciousness. However, he did it in order to create new simulations of reality. And when I say simulations, I mean models of how we think, feel, and see the world and interpret the world. And that essentially is. And he wrote a book that I recently read called Simulations of God. I would recommend it. However, that is essentially what the institutions, such as the media and government, is involved in to maintain a consensus simulation of reality.
Right. Yeah.
If the persons such as yourself interpret as false, and it is false, but it is false also because we are not sharing in that simulation. But for those within that simulation, it feels very much real. Because we're in essentially what we're talking about is neuroscience. Not just information, not just the media, not just So
yeah.
And then when you bring into how institutions within the UK, such as the Tavistock Clinic, have been integral in promoting new types of technologies and sciences that can influence us. Like so you've got Edward Bernays.
Psychology, yeah. Sorry.
Well, so I was just going to
Edward Bernays, yeah.
Yeah, George H. Estabrooks. These people who learned their trade essentially from war. George H. Estabrooks, he learned hypnosis from his work on Japanese prisoners of war. And was it World War II or World War One? It was World War II. Edward Bernays from advertising. And they have, the governments and the intel agencies, they've utilised this knowledge in order to hypnotise us, not just into, being consumers, but into manufacturing that consensus reality of simulation.
Yeah.
So I guess what I'm trying. So I guess what do you think the relationship is there between intel agencies and big finance? What's the organizational relationship that you're aware of between intel? Because it's something that's very
well. I mean, yeah.
Sorry, I think there's
there seems to be a bit of a delay going on somehow. I mean, these people, they are masters of psychology, or they employ people who are masters of human psychology, masters of the human psyche. They know exactly which buttons to push in the human brain, which levers to pull to get the desired response that they want, and that is all part of how they deceive us. It's they're very big on psychology. I've got a degree in psychology, by the way, and in my opinion, my considered opinion, psychology is nothing but a weapon. It's not what it purports to be at all, but then again, what is. So yeah,
What do
they
you
use
mean?
psychological.
Sorry for interrupting. What do you mean
Okay.
by psychology as a weapon?
They use it against us. They use our own psychological, traits as weapons against us in order to keep us in a state of fear, in order to manipulate our minds to believing, something that isn't true. For example, you mentioned the guy Edward Bernays. He was a master of that dark art. He was one of the guys who changed society into believing that it was right for women to go out to work instead of being stuck at home looking after the family. Whether that's, I'm not being sexist here.
Yeah, I know.
You know what I'm saying, don't you? And also it was him that introduced cigarettes to women. Okay, because they saw another marketplace. So they manipulated, the female psyche into believing that smoking was great, and there was no reason why they shouldn't do it, because it's quite a taboo thing in the early part of the 20th century for women to smoke. But he changed all that, and it's about manipulating society into the model that they want to see, whether that be for profit or power or both. This is how it works.
Yeah, I mean, I've got a degree in psychology counselling myself, and I'm fascinated by hypnosis. In the last couple of years, I've been reading a lot of literature by Estabrooks, and I've got I've made some hypnosis videos on my channel. For sleep hypnosis videos, videos that I try to for my audience to use. It can help with addiction, etc. However, I'm well aware that what you said is correct. You just need to look at the church congressional documents from the 1970s to see how the US government, the CIA, utilized these mind-bending technologies, including hypnosis, that dates back to George H. Estabrooks. And I know you can say, well, it dates back further to Mesmer and stuff like that. However, this was done against the consent of adults and children, and sometimes very cruel fashion. So psychology definitely has been used as a weapon, and arguably by some you could say are involved in a breakaway civilization, because a lot of these people that do use these technologies against the citizenry of a country are not held accountable for their illegal actions. So
absolutely.
So I mean, if you think about,
these people are a law unto themselves. I mean, sorry, there's a bit of a delay, isn't it? We keep talking over each other. I do apologise. They use it as a weapon, of course, and they get away with everything. There are no restrictions on them, no restraints, because the people who perpetrate this stuff are the people who rule the world, in effect. So sorry.
Yeah, and it's not just that they rule the world, it's almost like they're not a part of our world. And it goes back to what you're saying about a falsification of history. So a lot of people think about the Nazi paperclip scientists that helped create NASA, like Werner von Braun and stuff like that. However, you've got other senior Nazi officials and intel like Reinhard Gehlen, who was connected to Alan Dulles, who eventually went on to become the director of the CIA. In fact, Reinhard Gehlen ran European intel for the CIA under Dulles. And again,
Okay.
these people were involved in the most grotesque, barbaric acts on humanity. And yet, even after they murdered millions of people in camps, they maintained powers of, privileged positions of power, responsible for intel, responsible for creating NASA, responsible, um, in media spaces to create intel agencies. So when you look at the connections between these intel agencies historically and the notion of a breakaway civilization that isn't accountable, that I think that syncs up very much with what you're saying in your literature about those that
Yes.
deceive us.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Yeah, it's it's just part of this whole network of control. It's just one small. Well, it's a big element of it, but yeah, it's just one part of that network of control that they impose upon us. And governments are just an irrelevance. They're just there to make us, as George Carlin said, they just make us to believe. There to make us believe we have a choice in who rules over them. We don't have a choice at all. It's all predetermined. And even if we did have a choice, we're only choosing one puppet over another. And the same, more or less exactly the same policies will be followed no matter which government is in power. And I always make this glib comment, and that is that I never vote, because the problem with that is that the government always gets in. And
it just encourages them if you vote.
that does, yeah.
So what we're talking about there. Look at the connections between like organizations like Mossad, the CIA, nowadays spotlighted by the whole Epstein affair. Well, what's your views on that Epstein network, that spider web of connections that?
Right. Well, I think it's in my view, I think it's true to say that paedophilia is absolutely rampant throughout the upper echelons of society. Okay, they're all at it, every single one, and I believe that's the case because they use it as a control mechanism to keep these people in line. So if they dare to step out of line in any way whatsoever, they can easily be accused of paedophilia. And they will, every now and again, they'll throw one of their own to the dogs, as they did with Epstein, just to say, yeah, isn't it terrible, all the stuff that's going on? Yeah, we're going to cut it out. Don't worry, we're working on it, and blah, 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 blah. I'm not quite sure what the case was with Epstein, why he was suddenly exposed. I don't know, because he was, just about everybody who was anybody in the States and beyond was involved with Epstein Island. All the insidious, vile stuff that went on there. So I don't know why he was suddenly exposed. Maybe you have a handle on that, but I don't. But all I know is that it absolutely rife throughout the upper echelons of society, as I say.
Yeah, I mean, I think when we're talking about big finance, intel agencies, this guy Epstein's a perfect example of it. I mean, he died with a net worth of around $500 million, and apparently, allegedly, he accrued that wealth from investments in real estate, and that's one of the ways he met Donald Trump too, through investments.
Yeah.
But in terms of like how he got into, he was exposed. There was a former prosecutor, I think he was a prosecutor for Florida, called Alex Acosta. He was also Trump's Labour secretary. And Alex Acosta, in Trump's first term, he came out and said Epstein was in intelligence circles, and so he came down soft on him. Allegedly, that's why, because he was a
Right.
bit freaked out because of Epstein's connections. However, this wasn't in the mainstream media like it is nowadays. So you have people like Alex Acosta saying he was in intelligence. Then you have Congressman Massey. The Congressman Massey was one of the main figures who pushed through that bill in Congress that was to publish the documents, the Epstein files. And then you've got his partner, Epstein's partner, Ghislaine Maxwell, the
Right.
Madame. When her father, Robert Maxwell, passed away, you had 6 members of Mossad attend his funeral. Now, you don't get 6 members of Mossad eulogising you unless you're connected, So, and also his former business partner, Hoffenberg, who was arrested, who was charged because he was involved in a 450 million Ponzi scheme. Again, he grasped in Epstein has been involved in intelligence circles. So there's a lot of documented evidence to say this guy was in intel, such as Mossad and CIA. And again, he had connections to finance. So it's that network, again, of people who are not held accountable, but again, it's like they're almost a part of a breakaway civilization, and they can do anything they want to anyone.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, they are absolutely, definitely a law unto themselves. These people, they don't observe their own laws. They're just there for us. They're for us, not for them.
So there's one peculiar area that I've heard you speak about, and it interests me a lot because there is one agreement that a lot of the big nations in the world, like the United Kingdom, Russia, and the United States, they unusually agree on is Antarctica and who can travel to Antarctica and when.
Yeah.
Could you explore that for me? And what do you think is going on there?
Sure. Yeah. Something. Yeah, I'll do my best. I mean, obviously, we don't know for sure, but I'll kind of tell you what my belief is on it. But yeah, in 1959, something was an international treaty called the Antarctic Treaty was signed, and that, in effect, amongst many other things, it wasn't just about this, but it prohibited anyone from travelling south of the 60th parallel, unless they were absolutely authorized to do so. And basically, they're not going to give authorization to just anybody. Military can go, the elite go. We know that a lot of the, top echelons of society travel to Antarctica, and it kind of begs the question, what the hell are they doing there? But before I go on to that, why would they not want us to go beyond 60 degrees south? I mean, they come out with all these explanations about ecological protection and mineral rights, and there's all sorts of bullshit spouting from their mouths, as they do with almost everything else. But just to put that 60 degrees into perspective, if you transpose the 60-degree limit on the northern hemisphere, that would include the Shetland Islands. Right, the Shetland Islands are just over 60 degrees north. So you're looking at an area, if you draw a circle around the alleged globe, you're looking at an area from the Shetland Islands upwards that is off limits in the southern hemisphere. Right, now, why do I think that this is the case? Because I believe there is a strong case for flat Earth, and people might laugh at me, and I accept that. I set out about 4 years ago to debunk flat Earth and say that it was just a psyop. And the sad fact is that anybody who researches flat Earth, well, not anybody, but most people who do thorough research on flat Earth become flat earthers. Now, I'm not quite there yet. I'm torn. Right. Okay. But what I believe the reason we can't go to Antarctica. Oh, and by the way, that 60 degrees south parallel is sacrosanct. If you try to overfly it in a private plane or even in a commercial plane, or if you try to sail through it in a boat of any description, you will be told to turn back by there's something called the United Nations Antarctic Interceptor Force, the UNAIF, which is a secret organization for obvious reasons. But they will, if you refuse to turn back, believe it or not, they will shoot you down out the sky and they will blow you out the water. And there are documented instances of this happening. But that's by the way. So that just shows you the seriousness. What are they trying to protect? Well, there is a map that hangs in the lobby of the United Nations building in New York City, believe it or not. And it shows quite clearly our little portion of the globe, about that size, in the bottom right-hand corner, and then all around it, there is the Antarctic ice wall, and then beyond the Antarctic ice wall, there are dozens and dozens of other continents and oceans. So are they telling us that the globe is actually much, much bigger than it really, than they would pretend it is? Or is it that it's a flat Earth? I don't know the answer. I'm just speculating here. But why would they put that picture? Are they trying to, is it kind of some kind of a bluff or a double bluff? I don't know. But anyway, the point being, they don't want us to go beyond that 60 degrees south, let alone traverse the South Pole, because the geography down there is not really what they tell us. And that is my view.
Hasn't anyone traversed the South Pole, Antarctica, before there was that agreement reached in concert with all the main powers? Surely there must
allegedly, Amundsen allegedly went to the pole. Scott allegedly went to the pole a few weeks after Amundsen. Now, but those two characters are very, very dodgy indeed. When you look into their backgrounds, for a start, they were both high-ranking Freemasons. They were very, very. Amundsen, in particular, was a very. I don't want to go into too much detail, but we were talking about paedophilia before. He was of that ilk, shall we say. I'm not sure about Scott, but certainly the Scott expedition has a lot of very strange questions hanging over it. And of course, it was over dramatized. You get the Scott of the Antarctic story, exactly like the Titanic story, which is an absolute load of bullshit from start to finish. And I've written a book about the Titanic, the real story of the Titanic. So I know what I'm talking about. I researched that for 3 years. Similarly, the South Pole expeditions, that you've got to take them with a pinch of salt, I'm afraid. Shackleton was another one. He never got to the South Pole, but he had an adventure in the South. Shackleton's brother was jailed for stealing the Irish crown jewels, believe it or not. And it's thought in some circles that Shackleton was behind the plot. So they're very, very dodgy characters, all 33rd degree Freemasons. So basically what I'm saying is, take what they say with an absolute pinch of salt. I know it all sounds fantastic, but
you believe that the reason for this is that there's more to our plane than what geologists or governments are describing to us, that there could be other continents beyond this parallel, beyond this demarcation point.
And why they're hiding it, I couldn't tell you why they're hiding it, Vincent, but I know that there is something very, very strange going on there. And this is the essence of my latest book, actually. It's a novel, but it's full of truth bombs about what's going on. I can't speak. Sorry.
Well, why did you write a novel about Antarctica?
Good question. Because we don't know the truth. Okay, so it is all speculation, I have to admit, but a lot of the pieces fit into the jigsaw puzzle, if you know what I'm saying. But the other thing, of course, is that if I wrote a novel and said what I've just said, an alleged factual book, and said what I've just said to you, it would be laughed. It would be laughed at. If you dress it up as a novel, but fill it full of truth bombs, truth seekers like ourselves are going to read it with interest, and B, even people who aren't truth seekers are going to read it as an exciting adventure story, which is what it is. It's got everything in it. The reviews have been fantastic. I mean, absolutely unbelievable reviews on Amazon. So yeah, it's an interesting concept, writing a novel to try and get the truth across. And it works.
In a very general way,
that was the idea behind it.
In a general way, what is the plot of the story, the plot of the book?
Right. Okay. Well, it's about two RAF guys. They are seconded to the UN Antarctic Interceptor Force. That's how they do it. They take pilots from all over the world and they do stints down there. And they're based at a place called King George Island, which is 62 degrees south, just beyond the 60 degrees barrier. And it's their job to intercept in cursives planes that are, trying to go south, because people try to go south, but they do get turned back or shot down. Take your pick. And these two guys, they get talking to the people in these planes, because they say, when they ask them to turn back, they say things like, why? What's the problem? What's we're only flying to Perth across the Antarctic. What's the problem? And then they get into conversation with them, and then all these truth bombs come out about 9/11, about JFK, about Princess Diana, anything you care to name. They get into conversations about it, and eventually they realize that they're being lied to. And so, to cut a very long story short, they desert and they fly south beyond the ice wall and beyond Antarctica, because there was a guy called Admiral Byrd who in the 1940s he ran an operation called Operation High Jump. Yeah, and Operation High Jump was allegedly to test the capabilities of the US military forces in freezing conditions. But for some reason that was cut very short. They lost lots of men, they lost a few ships, they lost lots of aircraft. Nobody knows how or why, because those records are sealed. But Byrd came back and he kind of blew the whistle a little bit. He said that he'd been to a place beyond the ice that was a green and pleasant land, and he'd met a race of people down there. Now, whether the guy was on drugs or not, I couldn't tell you, but this is what he said when he came back. And a few months later, of course, he was dead. But
yeah, I remember reading a lot of literature about civilizations that were, that existed in the South Pole, that had, some of them had harnessed the power of Vril, for example. They were interesting stories, and a lot of these books were written at the turn of the 20th century. So it seemed to be a very popular theme about 100 years ago. And maybe that was because they were exploring more of the South Pole, or they were attempting to explore more. They were, dramatizing about the idea that there were people or nations down there. But it does remain an enigma because we haven't, unveiled it.
Yeah, it is. I mean, I don't purport to know the truth. I can only speculate based on research that I've done, and some of that speculation may be way off beam. Some of it may be valid. There's no way of telling. So I guess that's why I've not written it as a factual book, because there is no facts really to base it on.
There is one conspiracy that every time I engage with people on, I'm so dumbfounded that why they accept it, and that's the moon landing. The fact that 60 years ago we could invent a rocket system, the Saturn V rocket, that is superior to any rocket technology we have today, and that they did this, and when they reached the moon, they played some golf, collected some moon rocks, and then about 6 years later destroyed the rocket technology and have not been able to return since. And
They can't recreate it, according to NASA. They're not able to recreate it. That's just, to use an analogy, it's as though somebody invented a plane in the 1920s or the 1910s that was capable of crossing the Atlantic. And then after, 2 or 3 people did it, let's say, and then forever after that, nobody could cross the Atlantic again because they'd lost the technology. It's just, nonsense. It just doesn't make sense, does it? But I've written extensively about the Apollo landings and alleged Apollo landings and NASA itself. So yeah, that's in my book.
Do you feel
science?
Do you think it was done because there was the space race with the Soviet Union and they had sent the first satellite and the first man and the first woman, and instead of properly investing and competing with them in a genuine space race, that we just staged a moon landing? Do you think it's?
I think that's a simplistic view, and I know people do say that, but I think that the Russians and the Americans colluded in the whole thing. The Russians, it was agreed that the Russians would have the first man in space, America would have the first man on the moon. I think the reason behind it was just one word, and it's how we began this discussion, and that is money. NASA is an absolutely super massive black hole of money. Okay, they're taking $30 billion a year from the US taxpayer, and what do they get for their money? I would suggest absolutely bugger all, to be fair. But they I think NASA is just a sham.
Why do you think governments like China haven't? Do you think governments like in China are also complicit in this, this conspiracy to, conceal what really transpired in terms of space exploration? Because I'm a bit nonplussed why other governments haven't revealed the truth.
Yeah, I think it's not just about space travel or that kind of thing. The whole thing at the top, it's all run by the same people, basically. I mean, there are factions, there are warring factions within them all, but countries don't really exist how we believe that they exist. They are all run by the same group of people. They're the same cabal of people, and what we see in politics is just theatre. Okay, history's been falsified massively, and so is science, and just about everything else you can name. The whole of the world reality is fake. I know that sounds absolutely bizarre and incredible, but my 30 years of research of all this stuff have really taught me that to be the case.
What do you think is the best way to challenge that manufactured consensus reality simulation that the financiers, the politicians, and those who really govern and control the system? What's the best way to challenge that? Because again, we don't have the tools available to us like they do.
Yeah,
so
well, we can't fight them. We can't physically fight them. That would be crushed. There's no point organizing a rebellion, or that's just absolutely ridiculous. The idea of it. It's an information war at the end of the day, Vincent. All we can do is do what you're doing, what I'm doing, is spread the word. The more people that can actually accept this information, take it in, then the bigger the movement grows. And unfortunately, the truth movement is a very disparate movement. It's split into lots of different factions. They think he's a shill, he thinks she's a shill, blah blah blah, and on it goes. So it's very disparate, very fractured. But nevertheless, the only way we can fight it is by plugging away. I do my public talks, I do my podcasts, I write my books, you do your podcasts, and whatever else you may do. Other people may not be able to do that, and I accept that. People come to me, after talks and say, "John, you do all this stuff, but what can I do? I'm just me." I said, well, whatever you can do is great. Just talk to people. I know it's not easy. It's not easy to go to people in the pub or whatever, or on the street and say, did you realize that, this is all a load of crap? It's not. But if we if we can do that in those small ways, eventually the word will spread, and I think it is spreading. To be fair, I think since COVID, lots and lots of people are waking up to the realities. So it's a long, slow process, but I do think we'll get there. I really do. I'm very optimistic for the future.
I think you're right about COVID. There has been a lot of traffic to, people like Joe Rogan, Danny Jones, other smaller, outfits like myself, and yourself too. A lot of writers and authors. There's a lot more traffic going their way because we're exposing a lot of things that people took as facts and that were falsehoods. But when when the whole idea of a truther movement, and I'll be quite honest with you here, John, right? If it was 20 years ago, right, because I'm 40, so when I was 20 years old, I thought I had came so far and I was aware of how things ran. To fast forward 10 years later, I learned a bit more and I thought I was aware of how things ran. Now I'm 40 and I'm the same. And is there really a truther movement? What I'm trying to say is, as a psychologist, do we not just create these narratives in our own minds as to how things are, and we try to engage with one another to create a consensus so we can actually create a society? Isn't that really what's happening? But there's a discord there. It isn't harmonious anymore.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's a really good point, and I think you're absolutely right. Yeah, I mean, just to put it in perspective, I'm 73 years old, and I'm still learning every day. Every day is a school day for me too. But it is. I mean, as I said, the truth movement is very, very fractured, but nevertheless, it's all we have, and unfortunately, we can't do anything physical. It's an information war, so we just have to keep plugging away the best we can, and hope that one day it all gels together. It might not be in my lifetime. In fact, it probably won't be. But I am convinced that we're on the right tracks now.
Mm-hmm.
Go on.
I've got one last question. If there's one area that you would like to spotlight and draw attention to and ask the audience to research, what would it be? Because we've discussed Antarctica, we've discussed the Royal Mail, intel agencies, etc. If there's one thing that you would like to draw attention to and get people more involved in looking at.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many. It's difficult to pick one, but I would say the NASA and the Apollo landings is a great place to start, because there's so many holes in that. I mean, I could sit here all day and pick holes in that, and I've written about it extensively in the Falsification of Science as well. It's so easy to prove that the moon landings didn't happen, despite the mainstream kicking back and saying, calling us conspiracy theorists and all the rest of it. Because conspiracy theory, anybody who calls me a conspiracy theorist, I basically laugh at them, because, what is a conspiracy? A conspiracy is just, it's from the Latin to conspire, which means to breathe together. It's just two people sharing ideas. It's nothing, but it was actually coined in the aftermath of the Kennedy assassination, in the wake of the oh my God, what was the report called?
Is it the Warren Commission?
The Warren Commission, thank you. Oh. Yeah, I've only written about this stuff. Yeah, that's what you get for being 73, you see. But yeah, in the wake of the Warren Commission, people were questioning it, and the CIA came up with an insult for those people, and that insult was, he is just a conspiracy theorist, and it's kind of now being applied to everything. So yeah, we conspiracy theorists, are I forgot what I was going to say, but you get the picture.
Yeah, I understand. The moon landing is the perfect example, because there is so many holes with it. so many holes, from the rocket technology being available in the 1960s, but for some reason it's not available now. You get the Van Allen radiation belt, and the fact that when he went to the moon, what did he do? We decided to play golf. Okay, mate, if you believe that, you can believe that if you want, but I'm a bit more enlightened. Stanley Kubrick, his 2001, he
involved in filming.
wasn't he involved in filming a lot, like colluding with NASA in the way where he was doing a lot of film work for them?
Yeah, well, some people believe that Kubrick was the guy who created it. Created the fake sets and everything like that, because he was a master filmmaker, obviously. And they also believe that it was given that project 2001, given free rein to run that project 2001: A Space Odyssey as a reward. Whether it's true or not, I don't know, but this is what people say, for faking the moon landings.
All you need to do is replace the monolith with a golf club.
Yeah. Yeah.
But John, it's been a pleasure having you on. If there's anything you would like to promote or tell the audience about before you go.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I've got, like I said, I've got 9 books. Number 10 is on its way. Go to if you want to buy my books, please do. You can go to my website, falsificationofhistory.co.uk, or if you prefer, and I hope you don't, you can go to Amazon, go to my author page on Amazon and buy them there. Also on my website, there's lots of my podcasts. This one will be going on once it's published. I put them on my website, and I write articles that go on there as well. And I publish all details of my talks that I do around the country as well. So if anybody's interested, then please visit that website or Amazon, where you can find my work.
Well, again, John, it was a pleasure having you on. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Vincent. I've really enjoyed it.
Goodbye. Well, that was John Hammer. Our next episode features Matthew Ho. He is a former US Marine and State Department official. He'll be coming on to discuss the peace plan that is trying to be created. And stay tuned for that one. I'll be on the 8th. It should be a good one. And if you enjoyed, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Or if you're feeling generous, you can donate at PayPal or buy me a coffee. Thanks for watching.
Gold-pressed platinum, slip strips and bars. If you ever find some, you can lose it in quarks. Get a Ractogino, spin the double wheel. Order a black hole, just depends how you feel. Yeah, it just depends how you feel. Gold-pressed platinum, you know it's a gas. Mon vomits it up into a tiny little glass. Liquid platinum, more you amass. Better than bronze, cobalt, silver, nickel or brass.